Imagine this. You're flying 7 miles above enemy territory when suddenly your aircraft explodes into flames. Within seconds, you're tumbling through the sky over North Vietnam, one of the most hostile places on Earth for an American pilot. The year is 1968. The jungle below is crawling with enemy soldiers actively hunting for downed airmen. Your radio is damaged. Your survival gear is limited. And you have 17 days to stay alive in hell on Earth. This is the true story of Lieutenant Colonel Iceal Hambleton and First Lieutenant Mark Clark, two Air Force aviators whose F-4 Phantom was shot down deep in enemy territory during the height of the Vietnam War. What followed became one of the most dramatic and longest combat search and rescue operations in American military history. This is their story of survival, courage, and the unwavering determination of the men who refused to leave them behind. On April 2, 1968, the skies over North Vietnam were among the most dangerous in the world. American aircraft faced a gauntlet of anti-aircraft artillery, surface-to-air missiles, and enemy fighters every time they crossed into hostile airspace. For the men flying these missions, survival wasn't just about skill. It was about luck, split-second decisions, and the knowledge that if you went down, your brothers in arms would move heaven and earth to bring you home. Lieutenant Colonel Iceal Hambleton was no ordinary pilot. At 53 years old, he was one of the oldest active flyers in the Air Force. His call sign was BAT-21, and he was an electronic warfare officer, a specialist in the highly classified world of radar jamming and electronic countermeasures. Hambleton had flown in World War II and had spent most of his career in strategic intelligence roles. He knew things, sensitive things, information about American electronic warfare capabilities, classified bombing targets, and tactical procedures that could devastate U.S. operations if they fell into enemy hands. That knowledge made him both invaluable and an enormous liability if captured. Flying alongside Hambleton that day was his pilot, and together they were part of a larger mission supporting ground operations near the demilitarized zone. Their EB-66 destroyer aircraft was designed to jam enemy radar and provide electronic cover for strike aircraft. It was supposed to be a relatively routine mission, but in Vietnam, nothing was ever truly routine. As they flew over Cam Lo District in Quang Tri Province, the aircraft suddenly shuddered. A surface-to-air missile had found its mark. The explosion tore through the fuselage with devastating force. Hambleton barely had time to process what was happening before the order came through his headset. Eject! 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 He pulled the ejection handle, and in an instant, the world became a violent blur of wind, noise, and terror. The rocket motor beneath his seat fired, blasting him clear of the dying aircraft. His parachute deployed with a bone-jarring snap, and suddenly everything went quiet except for the wind and the distant sound of gunfire. As Hambleton descended toward the jungle canopy, he had time to think. And what he thought about terrified him. Below him wasn't just jungle. It was a free-fire zone swarming with 30,000 North Vietnamese army troops. The Easter Offensive, one of the largest North Vietnamese operations of the entire war, was in full swing. Enemy forces were pouring across the DMZ in a massive invasion. And Hambleton was coming down right in the middle of it. He could see tracers arcing through the sky. He could hear the crump of artillery. And he knew that every soldier down there would be looking for him. When he hit the ground, he hit hard. His parachute snagged in the trees, and he crashed through branches before slamming into the earth. Pain shot through his body, but adrenaline kept him moving. He quickly gathered his parachute, checked his survival radio, and took stock of his situation. He had a pistol, a survival knife, a radio, some water, a first aid kit, and not much else. He was deep in Indian country with no way out except to wait for rescue. And rescue, he knew, would not be easy. Hambleton found what little cover he could and keyed his survival radio. His voice was calm, almost matter-of-fact, as he reported his position to any friendly aircraft that might be listening. Within minutes, the Air Force command structure was in motion. When word reached headquarters that BAT-21 was down, alarm bells went off at every level. This wasn't just another downed pilot. This was a senior officer with access to some of the most sensitive intelligence in the United States military. The North Vietnamese would do anything to capture him, and the United States would do anything to prevent that from happening. The decision was made immediately. Hambleton had to be recovered at all costs. But the rescue would prove far more difficult and far more costly than anyone could have imagined. Within hours, a massive rescue operation was underway. The Air Force launched everything they had. A-1 Skyraiders, slow but heavily armed propeller-driven aircraft, circled overhead to provide close air support. Forward air controllers flew low and slow, marking targets and coordinating strikes. Jolly green giant helicopters, the backbone of combat search and rescue, prepared to swoop in and pull Hambleton out. But every time they tried, they were driven back by withering ground fire. The North Vietnamese knew an American was down, and they were determined to get him first. The enemy moved troops into the area, setting up ambush positions and anti-aircraft guns. They combed the jungle methodically, closing in on Hambleton's position. All he could do was hide, stay quiet, and pray that rescue would come before the enemy did. On the first night, Hambleton huddled in a drainage ditch, listening to the sounds of the jungle and the distant rumble of artillery. He could hear Vietnamese voices nearby, soldiers calling out to each other as they searched. He barely dared to breathe. His radio was his only lifeline, and he used it sparingly, whispering into the handset to report his position and the enemy activity around him. The forward air controllers overhead became his guardian angels, talking to him through the long, terrifying night, reassuring him that help was coming. But help kept getting pushed back. Every rescue attempt was met with intense fire. The North Vietnamese had turned the area into a killing zone, and they were waiting. On April 3rd, the second day, the Air Force made another attempt. A Jolly Green helicopter, escorted by A-1 Skyraiders, pushed deep into the combat zone. Hambleton could hear the rotors in the distance, the beautiful sound of salvation approaching. But as the helicopter descended, the jungle erupted in gunfire. Tracers lit up the sky. The Jolly Green took multiple hits and had to abort. Hambleton watched helplessly as his rescue flew away, trailing smoke. The forward air controller, circling overhead, came back on the radio. "Hang in there, BAT-21. We're not leaving you." But the reality was setting in. This was going to take longer than anyone had hoped. Then the nightmare got worse. On the same day Hambleton was shot down, another aircraft was hit trying to support his rescue. First Lieutenant Mark Clark, flying an OV-10 Bronco forward air control aircraft, was struck by enemy fire and forced to eject. Clark came down several kilometers from Hambleton, but he was in the same deadly area, surrounded by enemy troops. Now there were two men on the ground, both in desperate need of rescue. The operation, already complex, had just become exponentially more difficult. The Air Force now had two aviators to recover, both deep in enemy territory, both being hunted. The command structure made a critical decision. They would focus resources on getting both men out, but they needed a new plan. The direct helicopter assaults weren't working. The enemy was too strong, too well prepared. They needed something different, something creative. That's when someone had an idea that seemed crazy but just might work. They would use Hambleton's knowledge of golf courses to guide him to safety. Hambleton was an avid golfer, and intelligence officers knew the layouts of golf courses he had played throughout his life. They could describe holes on those courses using coded language that Hambleton would understand, but the enemy, listening to radio transmissions, would not. Each hole would represent a direction and distance he needed to travel. It was ingenious, and it was risky. Hambleton would have to move through enemy-infested jungle, alone, using nothing but a radio and his memory of golf courses to navigate. But it was his best chance, maybe his only chance. Meanwhile, Mark Clark was facing his own ordeal. Younger and less experienced than Hambleton, Clark was nevertheless a skilled aviator and a determined survivor. He found concealment in thick brush and established radio contact with rescue forces. Like Hambleton, he was surrounded by enemy patrols. Like Hambleton, he had to stay hidden and stay quiet. The North Vietnamese were everywhere, sometimes passing within meters of his hiding spot. Clark controlled his breathing, controlled his fear, and waited. He knew the Air Force was working on a plan. He knew they wouldn't abandon him. But as the hours turned into days, doubt began to creep in. How long could he stay hidden? How long before the enemy found him? Back at headquarters, the rescue operation was growing into one of the largest efforts of the war. Aircraft from multiple squadrons were diverted to support the mission. Intelligence analysts pored over maps and reconnaissance photos, looking for safe routes and enemy positions. The golf course plan was refined and approved. They would walk Hambleton out, one hole at a time, guiding him through enemy lines to a safer extraction point. It would take days, maybe longer, but it was the best option they had. The forward air controllers explained the plan to Hambleton over the radio, speaking in careful, coded language. Hambleton understood immediately. It was brilliant and terrifying. He would have to leave his hiding spot and move through the jungle, exposing himself to enemy patrols, all while following directions based on golf holes he'd played years ago. But he didn't hesitate. He knew staying put meant eventual capture or death. Moving gave him a chance. So he started moving. The first leg of the journey was based on a hole from a course Hambleton remembered well. The forward air controller gave him the coded instructions, and Hambleton plotted his course. He waited until dark, then began to move, crawling through the underbrush, stopping frequently to listen. Every sound was amplified. Every shadow could be an enemy soldier. He moved slowly, painfully slowly, covering only short distances each night. During the day, he would hide motionless, barely daring to breathe as enemy patrols passed nearby. It was exhausting both physically and mentally. His body ached. His mind raced with fear. But he kept moving. On April 6th, 4 days after being shot down, Hambleton completed the first leg of his journey. He whispered into his radio, confirming his position. The forward air controller responded with encouragement and gave him the next set of instructions, another golf hole, another direction. Hambleton took a moment to rest, to drink some water, and to steel himself for the next phase. Meanwhile, the Air Force was working on a plan to extract Mark Clark. Clark's position was slightly less exposed than Hambleton's, and there was a narrow window of opportunity. On the night of April 6th, under cover of darkness and with heavy air support, a rescue helicopter made a daring insertion. Clark heard the rotors approaching and popped a signal flare. The Jolly Green descended fast, taking fire from multiple directions. Clark sprinted from his hiding spot, his legs pumping with adrenaline-fueled desperation. The helicopter hovered just above the ground, the crew chief leaning out, reaching. Clark leapt, grabbed the extended hand, and was hauled aboard. The helicopter pulled up and away, tracers chasing it into the night sky. Clark was safe. 1 down, 1 to go. But Hambleton's rescue would take much longer. He continued his slow, agonizing journey through the jungle, following the golf course instructions. Each night, he moved a little farther. Each day he hid and waited, listening to the sounds of the enemy all around him. The North Vietnamese knew he was out there. They were actively hunting him, sending patrols through the area, setting ambushes at likely extraction points. But Hambleton was careful, methodical, and incredibly lucky. He avoided detection again and again, sometimes by mere meters. The stress was taking a toll. He was losing weight. His body was covered in cuts and insect bites. He was dehydrated and exhausted. But he kept moving. The forward air controllers stayed with him, talking him through each phase, encouraging him, guiding him toward safety. They became his lifeline, his only connection to the world beyond the jungle nightmare he was living. On April 10th, 8 days after being shot down, Hambleton reached a critical waypoint. He was closer to friendly lines, but still deep in danger. The North Vietnamese presence was just as strong here, maybe stronger. They had reinforced the area, anticipating a rescue attempt. The Air Force commanders knew they needed to act soon. Hambleton couldn't keep moving indefinitely. He was reaching the limits of human endurance. A new plan was developed. A ground team would go in. It was risky, incredibly risky, but it was the best option. A small team of Navy SEALs, supported by South Vietnamese commandos, would insert by river and make their way to Hambleton's position. It would be a covert operation, moving under cover of darkness, avoiding enemy patrols, and extracting Hambleton before the North Vietnamese realized what was happening. The team was led by Lieutenant Tom Norris, a Navy SEAL with a reputation for nerves of steel and unconventional thinking. Norris studied the intelligence reports, the maps, the enemy positions. He knew the odds. He knew the dangers. But he also knew that a fellow American was out there, alone and running out of time. Norris and his team prepared meticulously. They would move by boat along the river, using the waterway to bypass enemy strongpoints. They would move at night, slowly and silently. And they would get Hambleton out or die trying. On the night of April 11th, the team launched. They paddled silently through the darkness, their boat barely visible on the black water. They could hear enemy soldiers on the banks, talking, laughing, unaware of the American commandos slipping past them. It was nerve-wracking, every moment expecting to be discovered, expecting the jungle to erupt in gunfire. But they made it past the enemy lines and continued deeper into hostile territory. Meanwhile, Hambleton was given new instructions. He was to make his way to the river and wait. Help was coming. He didn't know the details, but he trusted the voice on the radio. He moved carefully toward the water, his body screaming in protest, his mind foggy with exhaustion. When he reached the riverbank, he found cover and waited, listening to the sounds of the night. Hours passed. Then he heard it, the soft splash of paddles in water. He peered into the darkness and saw the silhouette of a small boat. His heart pounded. Was it friendly? Or was it the enemy? He waited, his hand on his pistol, ready to fight if necessary. Then he heard a whispered voice. American. Thank God, American. He signaled, and the boat moved toward him. Hands reached out, pulling him into the boat. He was safe. After 11 days on the ground, 11 days of hell, Iceal Hambleton was safe. But the mission wasn't over. Now they had to get out. The boat turned and began the long journey back through enemy lines. Hambleton lay in the bottom of the boat, too exhausted to speak, barely able to process that he was actually being rescued. The team paddled silently, every sense on high alert. They passed enemy positions, sometimes so close they could hear the soldiers breathing, but the darkness and their skill kept them hidden. As dawn approached, they reached friendly lines. Hambleton was transferred to a helicopter and flown to a field hospital. He was emaciated, dehydrated, and suffering from exposure, but he was alive. The rescue operation had succeeded, but the cost had been staggering. In the effort to rescue Hambleton and Clark, 11 aircraft were lost. Several aircrew members were killed. Others were captured. The operation consumed massive resources and put countless lives at risk. It sparked debate within the military and among the public. Was one man worth so much? Was any man worth so much? But for those who flew the missions, for those who planned the rescues, for those who risked their lives, the answer was always yes. You don't leave a man behind. Ever. That was the code. That was the promise. And they kept that promise, no matter the cost. Hambleton's story became legend within the military. It was later immortalized in the book and film BAT-21, though Hollywood took significant liberties with the facts. The real story, the true story, is even more remarkable than the dramatized version. It's a story of human endurance, of courage under unimaginable pressure, and of the bond between warriors that transcends rank, service, and circumstance. Hambleton returned to the United States a changed man. He was haunted by the losses incurred during his rescue. He knew good men had died trying to save him. That knowledge weighed on him for the rest of his life. He rarely spoke publicly about his experience, preferring to honor the memory of those who didn't make it home by living quietly and with dignity. Mark Clark also returned home safely, though his ordeal, while shorter, was no less terrifying. He continued his Air Force career and, like Hambleton, carried the memories of those days for the rest of his life. Lieutenant Tom Norris, the Navy SEAL who led the ground rescue, was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. It was one of several extraordinary missions Norris would undertake during his career, cementing his place as one of the most decorated and respected special operators in American history. The lessons learned from the BAT-21 rescue operation led to significant changes in search and rescue doctrine. The military recognized that while the commitment to recover downed aircrew was absolute, the methods needed to be refined. Future operations would place greater emphasis on speed, on limiting exposure, and on balancing the value of the rescue against the risk to the rescuers. But the fundamental principle remained unchanged. No man left behind. It's more than a motto. It's a sacred trust. Every person who wears the uniform knows that if they go down, their brothers and sisters will come for them. They will risk everything to bring them home. That knowledge, that absolute certainty, gives warriors the courage to fly into danger, to go into harm's way, knowing they are not alone. The story of Hambleton and Clark is a testament to that trust. It's a reminder of the incredible bravery, not just of the men on the ground fighting for survival, but of the pilots who flew mission after mission into withering fire, of the planners who worked around the clock to find a solution, of the commandos who went into the heart of enemy territory to bring a fellow American home. The Vietnam War was filled with stories of heroism and sacrifice, of men and women who gave everything in service to their country. Not all of those stories have happy endings. Not all of those warriors came home. But the rescue of Hambleton and Clark stands as a shining example of what can be achieved when courage, ingenuity, and an unshakable commitment to each other come together. It's a story that deserves to be remembered, to be told and retold, so that future generations understand the true meaning of service and sacrifice. As we reflect on this incredible chapter of military history, we're reminded that war is not just about tactics and strategy, weapons and technology. It's about people. It's about the bonds forged in the crucible of combat, It's about ordinary individuals who, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, rise to meet the challenge. Hambleton could have given up. He could have surrendered, ending his ordeal and saving the lives of those who came to rescue him. But he didn't. He fought to survive, to evade, to make it home. Clark did the same. And the men who flew to save them, who planned their rescue, who risked and in some cases gave their lives, they did so because that's what warriors do. They take care of their own. The 17 days that Hambleton spent evading capture in the jungles of North Vietnam were 17 days of pure survival. Every moment was a test. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. He drew on his training, his experience, his intelligence, and his sheer determination to stay alive. He outsmarted enemy patrols, navigated treacherous terrain, and endured physical and mental hardships that would break most people. And when rescue finally came, when those hands reached out and pulled him into that boat, it was the culmination of one of the most dramatic and costly rescue operations in American military history. Today, decades later, the story of BAT-21 continues to inspire. It's taught in military schools as a case study in search and rescue operations. It's referenced in discussions about combat ethics and the value of human life. And it's remembered by veterans and historians as an example of the best of what the American military can be. Courageous, committed, unwilling to leave anyone behind. The legacy of Hambleton, Clark, Norris, and all the others who participated in that operation lives on. It lives on in every search and rescue mission. It lives on in every special operations insertion. It lives on in the hearts and minds of every service member who knows that their comrades have their back, no matter what. The sacrifices made during the BAT-21 operation were real, and they were heavy. Families lost loved ones. Communities mourned. The Air Force and Navy paid a steep price to bring 2 men home. But they would do it again, without hesitation, without question, because that's the warrior ethos. That's the code. You don't leave a man behind. The story of the F-4 crew, though in this case it was actually an EB-66 that ejected over North Vietnam and evaded for 17 days, is more than a historical footnote. It's a powerful reminder of human resilience, of the bonds that unite warriors, and of the extraordinary lengths to which people will go to honor their commitments to each other. As we close this chapter, we honor the memory of those who didn't make it home. We salute the courage of those who survived. And we recommit ourselves to the principle that no American warrior should ever face the enemy alone. This is their story. This is our history. And this is why we remember.